Welcome to the Patron of the Algorithm podcast, the podcast that basically doesn't exist until I want it to. Today is a very special day, like all days I record this podcast, which is infrequent, because I have David Peters, PDCGT, a game developer on. Everyone give them a round of applause. Round of applause. Clap, 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 clap. This is the first time I've had a game developer that I know of on the show because I barely make the show. But in the case of them, actually, yeah, you should introduce yourself. Just give a little quick introduction.
I think I can do that.
Yeah.
So my name's David Peters. I use PDCGT as my publishing name. I make indie games in 2D. They're mostly inspired by some of the games I grew up with, some of the ones I came to gain a fondness for in my teenage years. But I do the programming myself in an engine called contractually. I do the art, do the music. Sometimes I get a little bit of help here and there from friends, and I get a lot of help with playtesting. And I've been doing this for, I think, almost 3 years now independently.
Wow. How long have you been using Construct?
I think going on about 5 years now. It's the reason I'm in game dev at all, actually.
Really?
Would you like me to tell you about that?
Sure.
Okay. So, I didn't actually have any game programming experience during college, and I didn't intend to, take on a computer science direction. I was more on the graphics side, but I got pulled into an educational and game development job while I was there.
Oh.
And the teacher that I had was like, well, it's okay if you don't know a lot of programming. I know this one engine we can use. It's called Construct 3. And so he gave me about 2 weeks to teach it to myself. And I learned enough of it, and now I'm like, hey, I'll just use what I learned from that and make my own games.
You said this was in college?
And that's where... Yeah, this was in college. I think that's going back 5 years now. Would have been 2020 when I started this.
Wow. It seems like everyone had something to do during 2020, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. The signs actually were super perfect because I used to work at a library before then. And being in a library with even fewer patrons than before, it was a little agonizing. So after 4 years, put in my 2 weeks notice. 2 weeks pass, and then my professor immediately asks me about the game dev job. I think that's the luckiest stroke I've ever had.
The same day?
Basically the same day. I think it might have been within 2 days of my last shift.
Wow. That's incredible. I don't know how, there's always every time I talk to someone, they always have one moment in their life that's like, yeah, this changed my life. It just happened at complete random, but I just got extremely lucky in this case because I know a lot of people just have. It just seems that one event could just turn the stroke of your chrono trigger.
I know, right? I know, it's like the formative character development moment. Time stops and all the water droplets are suspended in air until the camera starts again.
Just like that Pokemon game.
Yeah.
But before we get into the weeds here, I did want to give the context of which I found David here and the game in which we're, I guess, mostly going to focus on in terms of discussion, but the one that I got introduced to him from. So basically I used to use Twitter back when Twitter was only slightly less bad. And I remember that the game developer Twitter was very vibrant at a point where every week you'd find one developer, two developers that making a very interesting project. Now, the real case is if they finish the project, and if you remember, they finished it by the time that they release it. That's probably the hardest part. But in the case of I found them through the game called Somnabuster, which has been in development for how many years? How long has it been in development?
It was a 13-month project.
Okay, so about a year and a month.
Mm-hmm.
And they posted a lot of preview screenshots and a lot of what's it called? like video references and development, a lot of development coverage over the game and over the course of the year. And it was around just before release. They put out a document for if the you wanted to cover if YouTube channels or whoever wanted to cover the game, right? And I submitted it because I'm like, I do have a YouTube channel that has an audience, I guess, and I have been following this game and I have enjoyed what I've seen of it. I'm very excited to actually play it, so I wanted to try it. And they you gave me a code, and I thank you for that. It was very and I played the game. I enjoyed the game. Only issue with me is that I'm bad with finishing games. I'm Professor Calamitous, if you call me. So I'm horrible
from
finishing.
Jimmy Neutron?
Yeah, from Jimmy Neutron. He can't finish anything.
Goodness.
Yeah, he had that ADHD
was a
bad.
cut.
I use that term all the time.
It's a good one. You gotta trademark that.
But yeah, so because I couldn't finish it, and I am contractually obligated to make a video on the games at some point, this is probably the best thing. It's just asking the developer themselves on the game, and getting all the questions I had out about the game, just asking them, showing it out. And I think, as for anyone, I see experiences firsthand. If I feel like a lot of people like being interviewed, not only because it's people like attention, but because you get to really expel your your thoughts about art and your your process, your mentality out there. And in this world where everything seems to be very focused on products, content, as it were, it's very important to have people's stories and people's like thoughts and processes behind stuff really covered. So yeah, it's pretty much one of the reasons I even started this podcast in the first place, despite the fact that I barely even do it. But yeah, so I think that's the main thing I had on here. So if I could get started with one question, I wanted to ask, first and foremost, when did you get started making music? Because you're like a composer, right?
I guess I am a composer. Everybody is their worst critic, so I never think of myself as a composer, but I started, during that time when I was making games for college, actually. My musical experience up to that point was, I knew how to play piano when I was, like, in 3rd grade.
Wow.
And then my brother started playing, and he was better than me at it, so I stopped. But the educational and game dev, it was a good excuse to go like, hey, if I'm going to be learning all these tools, I'm already kind of thinking ahead. I'd like to do this for myself, and I know I'll want to write my own music. So I approached my professor, who was also my boss for the position. I'm like, instead of using like stock music or like buying a pack of music and throwing it into the game, can I write some music myself? And he was like, sure, go ahead. So I used my spring break, the year I started there, to learn a program called DefleMask. Have you heard of DefleMask before, Maple?
I have not, actually.
Okay. It's very nice. It's a tracker. It's like a typical DAW is like a horizontal bar showing you all the audio as a waveform. The tracker is more like almost like an Excel sheet. You punch in the note you want to play, you assign an instrument to it, and then it auto plays it. And the DefleMask itself lets you pull instruments from a bunch of different retro consoles. So I always had a fascination with the Sega Genesis. I'm like, I want to learn how to write Genesis music.
And is that your favorite console?
I would say so. As far as like comfort factor goes, it's very important to me. So I learned how to do that, and I feel like most of the music I wrote back then, if I played it now, it would sound like Gem's Sega Genesis audio. Like the kind of really farty music you hear in like Disney's Aladdin or something.
Oh, like yeah.
Yeah, the trumpets, the real stock bass.
Yeah, it's not very like, the punchy stuff you'd hear in like the higher tier, like really thing games.
Right. Like in my mind, I'm like, I want to hit Gunstar Heroes. In execution, I was probably more like Green Dog the Beach Surfer dude.
Yeesh. Oh no, not Green Dog. Don't worry, it all gets better, chat.
It does. I've had a lot of practice since then. I had a lot of opportunities to learn, but but that was how I learned how to write. I just kind of like went at it. And I was very
Wow.
lucky I had a space to teach myself how
Did you do that for like the position?
for the position.
Yeah, like the music part.
Could I ask what you mean by that? Like,
Oh, like
you
the
mean
school game dev position.
yeah, I mean, I made some music for them. So like, we had a game that was like they make an island and they put cats on the island and they have to like learn how to regulate the cybersecurity systems on the island. So I tried writing a bunch of bossa nova music for it because in my head it's like it's kind of tropical.
Hmm.
Of course, it wasn't that great, but it was a learning experience. And then we made a game where we put a bunch of aliens in space and they have to do risk assessment on board a starship. So I wrote like a bunch of like big space fanfare kind of music, you know, like a Star Wars kind of thing.
Oh, grand stuff.
Hmm. And it all made it into the final ones that we sent out. And good learning experience, even if like if I played those songs to myself right now, they kind of make me cringe a little bit, I bet.
Was I was asking mainly because I think like the whenever you have some kind of like consistent position in something in like a group or a job or something, you naturally
Hmm.
get better at something really quick because you're just forced to do it because of like responsibility. You get really good really fast.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
And do you think that like what do you think, because I've watched a lot of your videos and I've seen a lot of your your works on like I can't call them sound fonts because it's a common, I guess, a misnomer, but like
Hmm.
what made you choose, like, I don't know, that like
The sound chip.
yeah, what made you like choose the Genesis sound chip over like other things? Like I don't see many like Fama Tracker things, because the Genesis is like kind of an underutilized one, and I know you have like an interest in it, but is there like a particular like reason, like music wise, it's just like the tone of it?
I like the tone of it. It's very electric. I I it's hard to put into words, but I just always had a childhood fascination with it.
Mhm.
And then like I think I'm kind of stepping over my words. I apologize.
No, no, it's fine.
I think what it is all video game music kind of has its own quirks and its own sound font things, but there's something about like the Yamaha chipset, which is like the one used in the Genesis, the one used in a lot of arcade boards, that has a very specific like shrill electric quality that plays into like the explosive nature of like character action games, of like shoot 'em ups, of a lot of the kind of games that I want to make.
Right. It's just like
Hmm.
the same way the Super Nintendo has like a reverby, dreamlike, kind of echoey sound, and that lends itself to like adventure games and RPGs the same way.
Hmm. Yeah,
Okay.
like I think of SNES music and immediately I think of like a Chrono Trigger, or even think of like ambient songs from like Donkey Kong Country.
Right.
All the
Okay.
ways that they took like the pre-made instrument files, or not instrument files, but like
Samples
whatever
or
they
MIDI.
do, samples is the word I was looking for. Yeah, I don't think it's MIDI itself, but it's akin to MIDI, and
Okay.
then they can add some layers to the audio with some programming finagling.
Okay. I did want to ask, since it's a very powerful question for game composers, since I guess I feel like in terms of you know your output, it seems that you're more focused on the game composition side in terms of like its quantity, because I guess music is easier to quicker to make than games are. But so
Hmm.
who are your favorite game composers? If I feel like you feel pretty strongly about that, huh?
Ooh, that's a good question. I have a lot of favorite game soundtracks. I'm trying to think.
Well, you could say the soundtracks if the composers don't
Um,
come to mind.
Here, can I have a? There's a composer who wrote some of the Shining Force games, I think specifically
Mm,
too, and he also did a bunch of other work for Sega
mm.
in the early '90s. The two I always think of are Jewel Master and Landstalker.
Okay.
They're both very heavily influenced by prog rock
Mhm.
and have incredibly strong depth of sound, despite the fact that they're actually using less instruments than the average game. Just want to make sure I'm getting the name of the guy correct. I'm real sorry.
No, go ahead. I'm looking up the Shining Force 1 soundtrack, and it says Masahiko Yoshimura.
I think that's a different guy. I think one and two were written by two different guys.
Okay, so that's
And
the first one.
okay, Motowaki Takanuchi.
Okay.
There we go. I love that guy's work. Very, very talented artist.
Do you think two's soundtrack is better than one's?
Uh, they each have their own qualities. Two is definitely more bombastic.
Mm-hmm.
One is a little reserved, but there's a couple ways it lends itself to the game quality. It's a little bit more down to earth. When you're in the moment playing it and hearing some of the more simplified like Genesis instruments, like the Sonic era instrument,
Right.
it's a little bit flat. It's a little bit like you're listening to something on like a broken jukebox.
A broken jukebox.
Just a little bit.
Okay.
It's earthier. It's a little bit more in the moment, a little bit more handmade. You can see kind of like the scratches and the edges coming off of it, and it makes you appreciate it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
If
Like
that
the
makes sense.
imperfections.
Mm-hmm. I'm always looking for imperfections in work because I think it's the unintentional that makes the artist's identity shine.
Right.
And I definitely admire that both in like the later Genesis soundtracks where they're really, really meticulous, but especially in the early Genesis soundtracks where it is really farty. And it does sound like something coming out of a really broken pinball machine. Because you appreciate and you're kind of imagining in your head what they were trying to do, you know?
You know what's crazy is that just before this I was playing the Switch port of Thunder Force 4 because I was trying to get into
Oh
I've been trying to
yeah.
get into shoot 'em ups in general, which is actually completely unrelated to this interview, but I just realized that you're a big fan of the Thunder Force series, yeah.
No, yeah, I love that series, and I'm really glad you bring it up. You said that's your first shmup?
Well, I've been trying to get into them. I got the Panoramic Cotton games, a couple of the ones on Switch, Thunder Force
Okay.
4. I think there's a couple of shmups. There's actually this extremely niche shmup that I got into that was on I have to put this on a sideline. There's this one application on the 3DS called Smile Basic, which was a sequel to PT Computer, which is basically a
Mm-hmm.
program that lets you program in BASIC.
Mm-hmm.
It was basically like one of the only open gardens for like homebrew that Nintendo was like, all right, fine, we'll let you do that.
That
And
was an app on their store, right?
yes, they had it on the DSi, one version on the DSi store, one version on the 3DS store.
Okay.
The DSi one could still be used because it actually lets you scan QR codes in, so it literally scanned in the data. The 3DS version substantially increased the file sizes, but I'm not sure if the servers are still up. That makes me very sad
Mm-hmm.
because lost media. But there was this
Mm-hmm.
one game I saw the developer in on Twitter that there's this one game I don't remember the name. It was just like it was called like it started with the L. It was like called like Lunar or something, and basically it was this 5 level shmup with this like I guess Kid Icarus Uprising like dialogue in the bottom like on the bottom of the screen, and you play like this.
Really?
Yeah, it's like you have the game has suffered real bad slowdown, but it's this horizontal shooter with like extremely good music. I remember the music was like really interesting and kind of somber, and like the mood
Oh
of it
yeah.
was very specific. And I wish I could. I'm gonna probably get my 3DS out and try to find that game again one day. But it's so obscure, and that's probably the first shmup like in terms of horizontal shmups that I was really like into. If we're talking about like rail shooters, I mean, yeah, Kid Icarus Uprising went triple platinum in my house, like Jesus Christ. But
I just played that very recently, actually.
really,
Very good game.
oh my god, it's so amazing. If you could be influenced by something for your next game, I definitely recommend that game. They said it's I remember this game journalist Jeremy Parrish said it's a on rails comedy routine. I'm like that's so accurate.
I have heard some people describe it as there's a one specific tweet Space Harrier with Seinfeld in the background.
No, oh my god. People, I need someone else to make a game that's like that tier because that is it's my favorite game, probably one of my favorite games of all time, just because it just has like some of the best writing I've ever seen in a game, and the gameplay is just also extremely good.
The voice acting is so well done too. Amazing performances with such good range.
The everything I don't think there's a single character that is like poorly voice acted there. Everything's just like so well directed.
They kill it, really. It's amazing.
Absolutely. But yeah,
But yeah,
I was gonna say
I
like
spent
I'm
oh
sorry. I just wanted to
no,
tell
you're
you.
good. You keep
I
going.
was gonna shift it back to Thunder Force, but if you're gonna do it,
All I was gonna say about Kid Icarus Uprising was when I play most things, I'm kind of thinking in my head, what are some things I can imitate from this that I find are congruent with my design sensibilities?
Mhm.
And the entire time I was playing Uprising, I was like, man, if I made a 3D game ever, if I have the time to learn how to, this is kind of like the base structure of what I would work with.
definitely. I think the issue with Uprising is that it's like, it's an extremely ambitious game, even for the
It
console
is.
was
It's
on.
so expensive.
That
It is unbelievably expensive, even by 3DS standards.
even thinking about like some of those areas where you fly in, those air battles, they had like fucking gigantic like space wars and shit in the game. It was fucking amazing, but
Yeah, it's 25 levels.
oh,
You
but
could make like 4 entire rail shooters worth of content out of what's in that game.
man, that was the best spring break of all time for me, man. Oh man.
Yeah.
Do you have any like rail shooters you think that like match that level of like bombacity? Because I am interested in like because I know a lot of like no not rail shooters but just, like
Mhm.
shooters in general. 'Cause I know shooters are like like there's a strange incongruence between the popularity of them in and outside of Japan. Like inside
Mhm.
Japan they're like still like not as big as they were, but like they're like a cultural
You're
touchstone.
talking about like rail shooters where it's like first person you're aiming at the things,
Oh
or are
no,
you
I mean
talking
like
about like shoot 'em
shooters,
ups?
yeah, shoot 'em ups in general, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Because rail shooters, I guess that's like a different pathway of shooter.
There's some overlap between the two, some overlap in appeal.
Hmm.
It's the arcade nature that definitely ties it together. But if you're looking for some good ones, definitely play the Sin and Punishment games. The
Ooh,
N64 one and the Wii one. They're both equally cinematic in their own way. The first one especially draws a lot from like Evangelion with its story themes, but it's still got all these explosive boss fights. You'll go through a stage and it's like you knock down a tower and then bugs start crawling out of the tower and then the giant spider starts crawling out of it and you gotta shoot it while there are planes flying over your head. And then one of those planes comes and intercepts you and you gotta shoot that down too. And that's just one level. It's awesome.
ooh, that's all, and that's the N64 one.
That's the N64 one.
Ooh, I do want to see how they accomplish that on the N64. It's a very interesting console.
It's a great game, and I would definitely say it's my favorite N64 game. And just as an aside, you know the developer Treasure, right?
Yeah.
Like of Gunstar Heroes.
Yes.
I believe that is the most time-consuming game they ever had to make. I believe it had a 2-year development window.
Wow. Actually, wait. Wow. I just realized is Treasure still like a developer as now? Did they get like bought out by like other companies and stuff by this point? 'Cause I know that Sega owns their IPs.
They own some of their IPs. I believe they're still legally operating, but like they haven't made anything in over a decade. I think the last thing they made was an anime tie-in game for the 3DS. I
Oh,
think Geist Crusher is the name of the brand.
wow. We're in a treasureless world. That's why it's over, guys. It's so over.
Yeah. Well, that's what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do, you know? I love treasure games and I want to bring back that spirit in what I make.
So, what's your favorite game from Treasure? Is it Gunstar Heroes, Dynamite Heady? Is it Gunstar Superheroes?
I'd say maybe Alien Soldier.
Alien Soldier?
Alien Soldier. It's it's both like a really wonderful game to play and a very impressive testament to the designers.
Mhm.
I wish I was better with names, but I believe the man who was in charge of making it at first did like 80% of the work all on his own over the
Ooh,
course of I think a year or a year and a half, and it was only at the tail end that the rest of the team came in and got into a shippable state.
wow.
And yeah, it's still got all of this incredibly ambitious tech and animation in it. It's doing like well, think of like flash animation or like tweened animation that you see on like modern cartoons, where it's like they're not making the frames, they're just kind of moving the animated limbs like a puppet.
Yeah.
They're doing that, but with like a 16-bit processor, which is actually incredibly difficult, both logistically and as far as the programming goes.
Oh, they're like doing some insane like sprite scaling stuff.
Not even necessarily sprite scaling up. Have you seen footage of Alien Soldier before, or have you played it?
I have played it, but I don't remember what it looks like at the moment.
Do you remember the boss fight with the turtle that's got like the samurai sword?
Yes.
And it's like its entire body is lunging towards you for its big slice, and like every single joint on its body is a separate sprite, and it's all got their own pre-rendered angles that the game knows to choose based on like how it's being animated.
Hmm.
It's hard to explain. It's like really, I feel like I'm turning into the nerd emoji talking like this.
Well, I mean, the reason we get people on here is for their expertise of various things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, Alien Soldier, wonderful game, wonderful game.
What's it called? I guess because I guess like the easiest way to think about it is sprite scaling, but yeah, it's not technically that. Yeah.
I believe there are some games that try to mimic sprite scaling on the Genesis,
Hmm.
which it can't natively do, but it can like duplicate or reduce the size of a tile by factors of two.
Hmm.
So you can do that to kind of fake a smooth scale by doing it in chunks and moving the tiles closer together or farther away from each other. Uh, I I think there's like a little homebrew game somebody made to demonstrate it. I want to say the name is Mini Planets.
When was
Can I
that
write
made?
that name down for you?
Oh, sure, I can look it up.
Mini Planets.
When was that made? You think?
I don't remember. I imagine it's something probably from like the 2010s, maybe.
Okay. Because I know the homebrew scene for basically every console has jumped up pretty rapidly.
Absolutely. It's very impressive.
Let me see.
We're seeing a lot of people starting to do SNES stuff even.
Oh yeah, it's I remember I saw like the modding scene for the N64 specifically like this month has gotten so much. Actually, well, at least fairly recently gotten so much better because they had like their tools like improved drastically.
Mm-hmm. I
Oh,
know
okay.
there's been a lot of decompilation work. I have to wonder that in the process of doing that, like new revelations or like documentation has enabled people to go back to the original hardware and learn some more tricks,
Hmm.
you know?
Because yeah, I remember the N64 has had that with specifically the developer of a bunch of Mario mods. I forgot his name. What is his name? But yeah, there's one developer that basically just figured like has been experimenting with Mario 64 modding so hard that he figured out how to make it run at 60 FPS natively on the console.
I do believe I've seen that too. Yeah, it's really impressive.
We're just in a golden age of I said this at someone's stream before. I was like, we're in a golden age of old games. I said specifically we're in the golden age of old Nintendo, but we're in a dark age of new Nintendo.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's like, yeah, that seems about right. But
Just about.
looking at mini planets, I definitely see it has this like the tile sets are just so like crunchy and like you could tell it's all like a grid. Every single tile is like specifically on there. It's so interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
But
man,
it's a very interesting style to like its own merits.
it looks like
It's
an
very
Amiga
interesting.
game.
A little bit.
Huh.
There's definitely a lot of overlap between the Amiga development scene and the Sega Genesis development scene. I know a major publisher, Psygnosis from the Amiga, they ported a huge amount of their work over to the Genesis with Electronic Arts help.
Oh yeah, kind of, yeah. EA did publish a lot of their stuff back then. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The I did want to ask in terms of uh, like music. So like, what are your favorite albums of all time? Do they like relate to your the way you think about like making music? Because I know for my music, it's a half and half on an album I really like can, actually can make its way into the way I can make music,
I think I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I would say my taste in like traditional music and what I look for when I make game music is a little different.
Mhm.
I'd say like some of my favorite artists are like some of the prog rock bands that my dad listened to when he was a kid. So like Emerson, Lake and Palmer, a little bit of Yes,
Mhm.
a little bit of Genesis, especially when Phil Collins was with them.
Oh yeah, the best era.
And then Michael Jackson stuff is really good too. And I only live like a half hour out from where the Jackson estate was.
Oh,
So it's a little bit of a cultural thing
like
over
where he was
here.
from?
Yeah, he was over in Gary, Indiana.
I was gonna say I know
Right
that
next.
exact place. I mentioned it to somebody today. I was like, oh man.
It's about the only like important celebrity thing going on where I live. Or I think
Yeah.
the one other interesting tidbit is my town neighbors the town where A Christmas Story was recorded. Have you seen that movie before?
Is it the one from the 50s?
I think a little bit later than that. It's the one with the kid who wants the BB gun. It's like a satire of Christmas stories.
Oh, I'm thinking of the other one. I'm thinking of the one where he's like, I want to live. I want to live.
Oh, It's a Wonderful Life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have to look up A
hmm
Christmas Story then. I'm not the type to watch many Christmas movies.
hmm
But
I feel
that's
bad. I derailed this conversation so
oh,
bad. The original question was about game music.
and albums. But I mean, the whole thing about it is that it's a conversation, so let it derail as far as you need it to because you learn more about a person from, their natural way of talking than if you, force them back into a box you shove them in.
That's fair. That's fair. Though I'd also like to try to provide a good answer to your question because it was a good question. It
Mhm.
really was. What's it?
But I guess you're talking about, the how prog rock bands are kind of different than what you actually put into your game music, right? Or like,
Mm-hmm. A little bit. The thing with prog rock is kind of like a changing movement across a longer song.
hmm
And with games, especially the kind I make, you have one area that you're in,
hmm
and there needs to be like a general vibe for that area. And so when I write music, I'm thinking less about the genre and more about like what are some of the feelings that it's supposed to stoke when the player's there.
right.
Sometimes that formulates in something that does have a very tangible genre. Like you played Somnabuster. There's a stage. It's the first one in the Toyland, and that one. While I was making that stage, I was like, "Oh, this makes me think of like being young and a kid with like my aunts and uncles at Christmas parties. I want to write like a really like a toy box waltzy kind of song.
Oh yeah, that was around like
Like a
stage
one two
three,
three,
4.
1 2 3. I think 4-1 specifically.
Yeah, 4.
Mm-hmm.
There was also the ones that like were in the dance hall kind of place, the
Mm-hmm.
disco or whatever.
Yeah, you got like the pumping EDM rave beat in the 3-3 stage with the DJ.
Yeah.
So stuff like that, where it's a little bit easier for me, someone who's outside the music sphere, to like go, hey, I know what genre is usually associated with this setting, or with this theme, or with this culture.
So like the
But
bossa
then you got
nova thing.
others. Yeah, kind of like the bossa nova thing.
Okay.
And then you got some other sections where it's kind of harder to pinpoint that, so you just kind of go with your gut.
Mhm.
And sometimes it turns out okay. Sometimes it turns out a little messy. But whatever it is, you just kind of accept it and roll with it.
Yeah, because how else is the game gonna get done?
Mm-hmm. Way too much to get done to like stress over like the little things.
Absolutely right. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I did want to mention that you mentioned Michael Jackson. I was like, yeah, his around the bad era was like it had the same Yamaha synthesizers as the Genesis.
Yeah. I mean, I believe the chipset might have even been used in like a lot of keyboards at the time, especially maybe going back a little bit further, 70s, 80s.
Yeah, like around the early. I think by the time the Genesis had that, it's probably like standard enough technology where they could just like easily produce it pretty cheaply.
Mm-hmm. That seems about right.
I think it's pretty interesting thinking back because like, oh yeah, the Genesis models, it's so weird how like old video game consoles work, because the Genesis models do have distinct sounds based on which model you have, because the Model 3 will sound very, not very slightly, like slightly different than a Model 1 Genesis, and it's kind of interesting.
Right, and I believe the Model 2 is a little different too. I think they all use the same chip. It might be something with the way the audio gets passed through the board.
Yeah, the
Like it
processing.
muffles something along the way.
I think because the I know the Genesis 1 and the Genesis 3 are very different in how they handle the audio, because I listened to like a comparison, and then the Genesis 3, it's not terrible, but it sounds very muffled, and the Genesis 1 sounds very punchy and crispy in comparison.
Mm-hmm. Well,
Uh,
the thing with the 3 was that it was produced by a toy company with the rights licensed out from Sega. So it's kind of like it's like a better version of like an app games console,
mhm.
but it's not like the genuine article.
Yeah, it's like the budget version. It'll play the games, but
Mm-hmm.
it'll just, it'll play them. That's what I can say about it.
Mm-hmm.
No
We
offense to
got
the
Toe
Genesis.
Jam and Earl at home.
Yeah, Toe Jam and Earl at home. I can't complain, because at that point you could get an entire Sega Genesis for $20 around '98. So it was like, it's a bargain.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what experience did you have with the Genesis, by the way? Is it like, are you like an emulator kid, or are you like a real hardware kid?
Both actually.
Really?
My story is a little bit goofy. Um, so I'm in my mid 20s right now.
Hmm.
I grew up like primarily with the GameCube, going into the Wii, stuff like that.
Hmm.
But we had a hand-me-down Genesis from my aunt. So like while my brothers are playing like Sonic Adventure 2 and Pikmin and they're playing Luigi's Mansion, we also got, like Sonic 2 and Echo the Tides of Time, and we got Pack Attack.
Hmm.
And it's like through my fascination with those games, I discovered Genesis emulation and then found the games that people were really interested in, or the ones that kind of like matched the things I like. Because when you're a kid, you're really picky about the video games you like. At least that's how I felt for myself.
Right.
So I'm looking for characters that are like real bright and energetic and bubbly, the way that like a Sonic or a Mega Man or a Mario game is. And so I found like Gunstar Heroes, and I found Pulse Man, and I found some of the Wonder Boy games. And they were all very fun.
Hmm. Did you get Pulse? Well, what's funny is that I remember finding Pulseman specifically from like the fact that it was developed from Game Freak, and I liked Pokemon enough to be like, whoa, it's by Pokemon guys. And I remember I played it on the Wii Virtual Console, and I was like, I don't even know how I feel about Pulseman, honestly. I feel very strangely about that game, but I distinctly remember that game had like headache-inducing backgrounds. They were insane.
It is. It's crazy. It's definitely a very overkill game, but there's a lot of very admirable qualities to it because of that.
I want more games like Postman to exist, but I want someone to mod Postman to be less like, ow, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I Through my work I have met a lot of friends who do have sensory issues, and it's like I could never recommend this game to them. It
Yeah.
might actually hurt them.
This game might kill them. Oh, jeez. But yeah,
Man.
what do you think of, like, because I know I asked you about Treasure. What do you think of Gunstar Heroes? Because I just like Gunstar Heroes, and I just want to geek about Gunstar Heroes. I wrote it down to geek about Gunstar Heroes.
Well, it's a wonderful game. Um, what I really admire about it is how maximalist it is.
Ooh,
I
that's a good way to
guess.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you think about Contra. Something that kind of defines Contra is that it's like an on-ground shmup. The rules about what you're allowed to do are pretty stringent. You move to evade things. You have one gun at a time. You can collect power-ups to change your gun. And if you get hit, you die.
Hmm.
With something like Gunstar Heroes, not only are they expanding out the move kit, not only are they creating all these crazy set pieces where the background and the boss are being affected by each other, like you're sliding down the pyramid down to the forest, and then the claws coming out of the trees to try and grab you, and then the boss jumps out from behind the trees and you're fighting it. Not only can you mix the weapons, not only can you throw the bosses, not only can you like do a slide move by doing like a Street Fighter 2 motion, but it's still like a fantastic, well-knit game on top of that. It's able to stretch the boundaries of what this genre is doing without ever losing the core identity. I think that's what makes it really timeless.
That's a good way to put it. Because every time I think about Gunstar Heroes, and every time I go and sink a few about an hour in, or at least like maybe a couple minutes before I get to Agent Black stage or whatever one was the
Oh
board.
yeah, the dice maze. Oh
Yeah, I always get
no.
stuck there. Every time I play it, I just realize like this is just like peak dynamic game design. It's like every second something's happening. Every second you're being engaged in a like a new way, and it's dynamic in a way that it's very difficult to make. It's like where you're trying, like they were trying to impress people with how like everything happens. It's explosive,
It's a game that definitely wants to bring a reaction out of you.
and
And I think that makes it very easy to share with other people. Like I've got a lot of family
mhm.
that I try to share my games with, and like they got their own stipulations about old graphics. But I get my brothers to try Gunstar Heroes here and there, and they always react so vividly, like to the bosses, to how explosive the weapons are. They get to the dice maze, and we're like bullying each other over who's gonna get to what panel, who's gonna get the health items, who has to fight the little guy that you have to slide into to damage him, or else he throws you and deals 20 damage.
It's so funny, that little guy.
There's all these very memorable moments. It's storytelling in the abstract sense, but that's the crux of what makes game design important. Being able to either experience a story that the game has provided to you, or make one for yourself through the tools that it's provided to you.
Hmm.
I would say Gunstar Heroes definitely falls on the former. Does it very well.
Honestly, now you talk about it, I really do think that like um the idea that older games have like inherently just bad graphics, right? It's like, yeah, there's certain games that just defy that like logic in general, because it's just like they're just so they dazzle you so much that you forget you're even looking at an older game.
Definitely, definitely.
Like if you play
There's
Green
always.
Dog.
Oh yeah. Well, Green Dog is its own case. Ooh. They didn't even give him eyes.
Ugh. I thought he's supposed to be for the earth. How are you gonna be so ungodly? How do you look so toxic?
Oh my goodness.
How are you gonna make a game that belongs in a toxic waste dump?
Hey, you can't be too mad at him. With that straw hat, it can make a good bird's nest.
You
Just give
know
it
what?
back to the environment.
That's true. If Green Dog gets buried, he'll decompose and give back to the earth, which is what we all hope for in our lives, huh?
Yeah. A franchise worth bringing back if decomposing Green Dog is what we get out of a sequel.
I hope that Sega listens to this and they're like, wait a second, you're cooking. And speaking of Green Dog, what are your favorite games just of all time? Do you have like a
Of all
list?
time?
Yeah. Or you could separate them by genre if that's easier.
I like Sonic games a lot because I grew up with them. I really love Sonic Adventure 2. I love Mega Man games because I really grew up with them. But my favorite one isn't like one of the platformers. It's actually one of the RPGs, the Battle Network games. Have you
Ah,
heard of those?
I have. I haven't played any though.
They're very interesting. They're very of the time. They're kind of cashing in on like the turn of the millennium and the obsession with like new technologies that are like interdisciplinary to each other. So like all the characters got a device that is essentially its universe's smartphone before smartphones existed. Uh, the character in the game, Lan, he's the human. He has Mega Man as his little like phone avatar. And so you switch between the two in the real world and the cyber world. You fight enemies and you collect like data that you convert to cards that you use to build your deck. And it's always very interesting telling people how much I love those games because they are very different than all the other kind of games I like, because I'm always usually a stickler like I want to play arcade games. I want to beat something in 2 hours and put it down. and then that game is like, I want to sink 80 hours into getting the best times I possibly can against these bosses.
You can refight bosses in Battle Network.
Oh yeah, it's very meticulous with its post-game content. Every boss has like multiple versions that you refight, and you get battle chips, which are like the cards from beating them that are based on their moves. And in the later games, they expound on that further, where they're like, the battle chips you get from them are stronger depending how quick you beat their strongest form.
Oh,
So if you can like get these fights down to like 10 seconds or less, you can get these like giant beat sticks that just defeat things instantly.
speedrunners. Love that.
Yeah.
Oh man, you know it's crazy. Because I know Bowser's Inside Story had a thing like that where they had the boss rush and it was very in depth. They had like various versions of each boss. I never knew that Battle Network had that same thing.
Really?
Yeah, I never because in terms of Mega Man content or whatever, my blind spot is probably Battle Network, Star
Star
Force,
Force?
like the newer stuff. My main spots are main series. I played a little, probably halfway through X Zero. I really loved the Zero as a kid. I was trying to play through a little bit of specifically Legends 2 when I was yeah, and I guess ZX since that's in the compilation now.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I never really tried Battle Network, so honestly, I might need to try it. What's your favorite out of those like the sub series?
Uh, well, Battle Network would be my favorite sub-series, and my favorite entry is probably 3.
Mm.
It's like, it it is so meticulous with what it wants you to do with its systems to complete all the post game that I just kind of like burned like years of my childhood into trying to discover everything.
Hmm. I love games that like I don't know. Whenever I don't think I'll ever obsess over a game like I obsessed over like Pokemon for instance. Like I will ever again unless something happens beyond my brain or something. But
Mm-hmm.
but yeah, a game like that you really like sink that much time into, and your childhood brain just like obsesses over it. Only happens once or twice in a lifetime. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
that really changes who you are.
It does. But it is kind of nice to have those games there. It's nice to know I can always go back to this and I'm still going to have the same joy with it that I had as a kid
Mhm.
because the things that I admired about it didn't change.
I guess you're right. So are you like have you played all of the Battle Network games at this point?
Yes, I think the only one I haven't touched is there's a DS remake of the first game. It was Japan only,
Of course.
and I think literally like the only things of significance it changed is it added a scenario that ties into the Star Force games involving time travel.
Mhm.
It happens right in the middle of the game, and that's not brought up again.
That's pretty funny.
And it is kind of funny. And then I know they rebalance some of the cards that you get. So like things that were really overpowered in the original are a little weaker. Some things that did literally nothing in the earlier game, a little bit stronger.
Hmm. That reminds me. Do you like Digimon?
I have no familiarity with Digimon. Hey,
Wow.
that's not true. I have a friend who taught me how to play the card game, and that is the extent of what I know of
The
Digimon.
Digimon expert in chat. Everybody, give him a round of applause.
No, no, you can't give me that platform. I'm gonna prove I'm a fraud in like 2 seconds or something.
The Digimon expert. I just wanted to ask because Battle Network and Digimon just have the same vibe to me. The turn of the millennium tech, you know,
Mm-hmm.
optimism kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Technology being like a second space to the physical world, being like personas that we either take on in that space or interact with.
Honestly, I was playing Cyber Sleuth this week, and I'm realizing like, yeah, no, I mean philosophically that is the way we consume technology now, but like in real life, it's not as like cool as that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, damn.
Technology is becoming so ubiquitous that the novelty factor is definitely wearing off. I sometimes wonder if it's just getting older and more used to it, or if there's something about that old technology that was just more admirable. I think of
Honestly,
like the translucent green plastic. and I miss that.
Like the Game Boy Color era stuff.
Yeah, like those N64s
You
that you
know,
can see through and stuff.
my issue is that like because there's this what's it called? There's this one console. It's a yellow like one with the little crank. The Playdate.
The
That
Playdate, yeah.
it's like that console is certifiably basically like the console that everyone desires, right? Everyone's like,
Hmm.
oh, I wish games were more fun. I wish games were more simple, and it's right there. But the only issue is that first of all, it's made by Teenage Engineering, so it's expensive as fuck. But
Hmm.
also, you know, since it's such a niche product, it can't really get the same like marketing or whatever as another one. So it's like the issue is that the way games were made are just not like it's the same thing as indie games, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm
Hmm.
so sad I can't play any games like Battle Network anymore. And it's like, okay, they have games like Battle Network in the indie space, but it's like what they mean is I can't play it made by Capcom.
Yeah.
So it's like,
It is a little unfortunate. Like, money kind of dictates what people can and can't make. And I try not to let my tastes in game design reflect like just budget or like spectacle. But there are a lot of certain qualities to games that you can't get back through an indie team just because they only have so many resources they can use.
it's true. I do think that's like
Hmm.
an underrated aspect of like game develop because it's like the same thing as like whenever a band or an artist makes a really ambitious album or something, right? And it's like
Hmm.
someone could make an album that good that affects you emotionally, but they can't make it that ambitious because they just don't have the resources.
Hmm.
If you try to make Sergeant Pepper's right now, you'd be stuck because you'd be in debt, a lot of debt. Um,
I bet, I bet.
but I did want to ask, since we're surprisingly into this podcast at this point, can I ask you just like, I guess to go over some of Somnabuster's development, like how did it started, what like, gave you the idea for the plot of the game, the settings, stuff like that.
Okay. Somnabuster. Should we give a background about the game as it released before we talk about what it was going to be? Or should I
Um,
just get right into the pre-development?
I think you could just explain the genre and like what the main like part of the game is like what would make sense to for the contrast. You know what I mean?
Okay. So, Somnabuster. It's like a hand-drawn platformer. It mixes kind of like the rigid platforming style of like a Kirby game with a couple like momentum tricks you can get out maybe like a Sonic game. So you've got like a cannonball move and it changes your maximum acceleration. You can use that to chain off of enemies, keep your speed. The setting is kind of like an Alice in Wonderland setting, somebody from the real world, dissatisfied with life, gets pulled into a fantasy world. Fantasy isn't all they seem to be and they want to get out.
Mhm.
Uh, the way the game started was the first game that I made after I started doing indie dev, Cycle Chaser. It's like a little arcade shmup. I wanted to go the next step up and make a running gun. And the idea I was toying with was something with like a fantasy setting, kind of like the Cotton games.
Mhm.
And what I was finding was I didn't have enough know-how about programming to do what I want to do with it. And the other thing was so many of the people who did find Cycle Chaser were very critical of the game's length and like the lack of extra content, and the lack of like story. Like it kind of discouraged me from wanting to immediately jump into another arcade style game. I was a little afraid that like if I burn like say 9 to 15 months making this and I put it out, it'd just be like a big money sink for nothing and like no one will find it and no one will play it.
Mhm.
So I was kind of tooling around how can I simplify this and make it something a little bit more mainstream. And what I was finding was I really liked a lot of stories about like escapism at the time. Like again, Alice in Wonderland, but even like some other Disney stories, maybe like a Peter Pan. And I was thinking, what if you could make an interactive version of something like that? And a specific game I was thinking of was World of Illusion.
Oh.
It's another Genesis game. It features Mickey and Donald, and it's a platformer, but it's not very rich on platforming mechanics, which is kind of the point. You just move and jump, and you're kind of at the whims of the world. You know, sometimes you land in a minecart and you just gotta ride it out. Sometimes the terrain underneath you is shaking. Sometimes, you know, you're climbing up a beanstalk and you gotta work together to pull yourself up slowly through these ropes. And maybe that's not something that people look at and they go, oh, that seems exciting to play as. But it's got its own weight to it. You're feeling the weight of the world.
Mhm.
You're feeling the space that you're in, and I always really admired that about that game. So the starting ground for Somnabuster was Alice in Wonderland style game where you don't have a lot of movement abilities, but the world is kind of moving you around. As the game development went on, a lot of that eventually pivoted to include some of these movement tech that you see in more like speedrun style games. And there's definitely a lot of goofy stuff in it, but I always tried to keep the forefront on what is the level expecting out of you, and what is it kind of like forcing you to do outside of your comfort zone. That was kind of like the mode of operations in my head for when I was designing it.
Okay. Did you
Sorry if that was a lot.
No, that's exactly what I wanted to hear out of this. In fact, actually,
Okay.
you know, what's crazy is that you mentioned the Disney illusion games, and you know, it's the first game I actually thought of whenever I played this. I'm like, this is like that one game where like you throw your head in the Genesis.
Are you thinking Decap Attack?
Yeah, I thought of Decap Attack. I don't know
Oh my
why.
goodness.
It was
It's
like
funny you say that,
what?
because I think I've played that game once for like 2 levels and then never again.
Oh my god! I was like, this game is like pretty obscure. I'm like, how did they know? I'm like, how did they know of such peak? uh, but I remember I played the Castle of Illusion games. Cause I do a thing where I used to stream a lot more. I barely do it now because they probably get fucking interrupted halfway goddamn through. But I used to do things where I just like go through Genesis ROMs and just like play a lot of them at once. And I played through
Like a little roulette.
yeah, like a roulette, and I just go through and honestly, like the Genesis has a lot of like interesting ways because the weight of a Genesis game is strangely consistent. Like if you go through a Super Nintendo platformer, some of them are a lot floatier, some of them are a little heavier. Like it could be from Bubsy to Mario, so like Mario to like Donkey Kong. They're very different ways they weight. But like
They
Genesis,
definitely are.
yeah, Genesis ones seem to have like a simple arc, which like one, you know, it's like you know, it's like Dynamite Heady, Gunstar Heroes, Decap Attack, the Castle of Illusion. Like, sure, Castle of Illusion is a little lighter because you have to bounce on people, but more or less they are all kind of the same weight. And I didn't think of that because now I just realized because I'm like finding games that influence it. Like, there's a lot of games I thought of, honestly.
Mm-hmm. That is something I've never noticed about those games. It's interesting that you point that out, the similarity in the jump arc.
It's something you only notice when you play enough of them. I just thought that was funny whenever I thought about it because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, something about the Genesis just has like. Did actually now that you say it, did you have a flash cart for your Genesis? By the way, did you ever get a flash cart?
I did. In college, I ended up picking up one for myself, and that was how I experienced a lot of shmups on there.
Okay.
So I think that was the first time I ever got a one credit clear on Thunder Force 4. It's my first time playing some games like Sagaya
Mm.
and Super Fantasy Zone and Battlemania Daigenjo.
Oh, I haven't heard of that one actually.
Very interesting game. It's like, imagine a horizontal shmup, like if it was kind of like an anime OVA. Like
Ooh.
you're these two, it's almost like a dirty pair kind of like group of characters you play as, and all the levels sometimes have like a comedy beat going on in them.
Oh, kind
So
of
like
like
you're flying over
Cotton.
like a metropolitan monorail, and then there's a squid that grabs onto it and starts shooting at you, and the guy riding the squid is like a parody of like a Japanese pop culture figure. It's
Oh,
got really amazing music too.
what's that one game? Kaio Flying Scott Squadron.
On the CD,
Yeah, on the Sega CD. Like, is it similar to that?
yeah, that one.
Okay. And like Harmful Park, like kind of like stuff like that.
Yeah. It's kind of in that vein. You know, it's like It's not quite like a cute 'em up. It's more like the humorous in between of a traditional and like a cutesy shoot 'em up.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I did want to ask because since I said I am trying to get into shoot 'em ups, I want to ask like, there's two questions I want to ask, distinct questions. So I guess let
Yes.
me think of the shorter one first. So shorter one first, and I'll ask them both at the same time. What shooters would you recommend to someone getting into the genre, just like as a beginner? Like, what would be the most enjoyable ones, like in terms of like the ideas of it, and what is the appeal of the genre, like the core appeal you'd think of the genre? Because whenever I get into a genre, I kind of want to know like what am I supposed to be looking for in this game? What is what is the angle?
Those are both good questions. The the first question, it's a little bit hard for me to articulate an answer to that,
Mm-hmm.
just because like to encourage anyone to get interested in a genre by starting with like the easy or the approachable game
Mm-hmm.
can be a little bit difficult because it's like if it's not a fun game out of the box, what's the point of playing it? So really, I would just kind of encourage you to look at what people consider good shoot 'em ups and then pick the one that looks cool to you
Okay.
and then learn that game. Because the other thing is, even though shmups have a lot of overlap with their design, what they are expecting out of you, the player, is very different. You have like your bullet hell games where they're expecting you to just twitch dodge through these very, very slow but narrow pathways. You think like a Toho kind of shoot 'em up,
Right.
where like you're weaving pixel by pixel. And then you got more like the traditional like 90s shmups. Think like an R-Type or a Gradius, where they want you to memorize what the stage layout is like. And they are going to cheap shot you a lot. And you are going to die and lose your power-ups a lot, and you're going to feel very frustrated, but that's part of the core appeal,
Mhm.
you know?
So like
And
there's
there's
different
no...
angles, like what different developers want out of the player too.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. Admittedly, when you brought up earlier that you were trying Thunder Force 4, there was kind of that voice in my brain like, that's actually kind of a rough game to start with, because it has a lot of rules that don't really overlap with other shmups. Like, you have to hit certain bosses in their weak points, but
Hmm.
only certain bosses make the weak point visible. And then other times it's like making you memorize things. Other times it's making you weave through tight paths. Some things are very invisible to the eye as to what you need to dodge, and other times it's kind of hard to tell. Like the background and the foreground are kind of similar in color. I remember when I played it for the first time, even though I already had a little bit of shmup experience, I was really overwhelmed and I didn't like it at first.
Wow. What's crazy is
Mm-hmm.
that was it that's a I guess it's a difference in our taste because when I played Thunder Force 4 I was so dazzled by the presentation that wanted to make it myself. I didn't really care if I died, like I literally I played on like 3 credits because I was like, all right, well, if I don't feel like I want to learn this game, I might as well just go and let myself die quicker so I actually learn how to play it because
But that's exactly the right kind of mindset to have with shmups, and good on you, man. Like,
it's very difficult to get into that mindset because a lot, especially when you play on emulators, like a lot of it's hard to get out of the modern mentality of like autosave, save states and shit like that. You have to just make
oh
yourself say,
yeah,
I gotta die, I gotta learn it again. Like Ikaruga, you gotta say, I gotta die, I gotta learn it again.
you gotta die and learn again. And you gotta play without frame lag. So, and emulating shmups is always a gamble.
Mm,
Those little bit of extra frames do make a difference.
yeah, it's like fighting games.
Just like fighting games.
What's it called? For
Yeah.
what's crazy is that Thunder Force 4 has just, I think the best thing about it is that it's present, the graphics are like so like sci-fi dark and gritty, but they're like uniquely like they have really interesting tones because I think R-Type and like Gradius, they look good, right? But they don't have like the interesting color schemes as because R-Type specifically is like very influenced by Geiger, but it's
Mm-hmm.
not like what's it called? Like I think though my favorite shoot 'em ups are probably the ones that are influenced by like science fiction, like cyberpunk stuff, like Akira or like not my Ghost in the Shell because I probably made after a lot of them, but like a lot of those like spaceship Gundam type shit. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Kind of like that interfacing with technology kind of theme.
Yeah, a lot of those like really like spacey kind of ones, you know, like the because I
Mm-hmm.
know the issue with shoot 'em ups that I found is that um a lot of them tend that they tend to have an issue with personality, which is because it's like a lot of them, I don't know, it's a genre that you it's hard to get into because you don't really see, because a lot of other genres, right, like let's say RPGs, you know, the characters are very important for any game. You know, for adventure games
Mm-hmm.
there's like Nathan Drake or something. For like RPGs there's like, you know, the Persona cast. For fucking Mario there's like all these other genres of like various, you know, characters. But with shoot 'em ups, it's like, you know, of course there's like, you know, Kid Icarus Uprising, like Spar Fox or whatever, that focus on like a cast of characters. But a lot of shoot 'em ups, especially the most critically acclaimed older Japanese ones, are like very focused on like the spaceship and the level design, right? So
Yeah.
to attach yourself to them and to say I want to get into that one, it's like, you know, you have to like think a different mindset. And I think it's been a challenge that I think it's been very interesting, because like it's always been a blind spot in terms of my game consumption, you know.
Mm-hmm. It can be really difficult looking from the outside onto the inside, telling what the identity of a shmup is if you haven't really gotten engrossed in the genre yet. Because they do have their thematic overlaps. You know, you got your military themed shooters, like your like 1942. You know, it's
Mhm.
World War II planes and whatnot. And then you got your sci-fi themed ones, and you got like your alien or bug themed ones. It's like, to somebody who doesn't know how these games play or the kind of people who are making them, how do you tell the difference between Fire Shark, the game where you control a biplane shooting at other biplanes, or Strikers 1945, the game where you're controlling a biplane shooting at other biplanes, but one of them turns into a crab, you
Ooh.
know?
It's like how in the '90s, you know, they made making a lot of beat 'em ups. So someone had to come out and say, "I'm gonna make Ninja Baseball Batman." That's right.
Yeah,
You got to say, "I'm gonna be
no more
unique."
guys in white t-shirts and jeans. We're all being like cartoon characters now.
We got to be wacky.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think like shmups are just like a very interesting genre, because you know they have such a like it's strange. Like Japan kind of just kept it to themselves. Like of course they like put a lot of them over here because they're easy to port because they barely had any dialogue. But like in terms of like what we liked, we're like, all right, Galaga's cool, and then that's kind of it. Maybe Xevious, but we're out. You know.
Mm-hmm. I think roleplay is a very big factor to why maybe they didn't get so popular over here. Like in America, at least, people really want to put themselves in the shoes of the character they play as.
Mhm.
Maybe not even like on the basis of character design, but just about what the character is doing and like how that extends to like their own real life dreams. And so moving around a little hitbox shaped like a space fighter doesn't always communicate that.
Yeah, that's why I think
It's an acquired taste.
you know, I don't remember. I think it was a video by some YouTuber who covered like fads. They usually make like lost media videos. They covered fads that were in Japan in the '80s in terms of video game like development that didn't make their way over here. And then they mentioned like you should try out some shoot 'em ups. And I don't know why that struck me. It's like, you know, this is the time I'm gonna try them out, because um you know, it's the same thing. Like when someone says something, it just hits your brain the right way. It makes you do something that you never thought of before. I don't know why it happened like that.
Of course.
Did you
It's
have
a
you
very wide genre.
I want to say have you ever explored the TurboGrafx library, because it is adjacent to the Genesis?
I've explored it. It's a good console with a very interesting selection of games. I would say, well, we're talking about the shmups right now.
I guess, yeah.
Both consoles are very known for their shmups. I would say the difference between the two is more like, I guess the TurboGrafx was kind of appealing to more like the otaku side of like the Japanese shoot 'em up audience.
Yeah.
So it's got a lot of games that are very high on difficulty. It's got games that kind of play to your expectations of what a traditional shmup is and then steps on top of it. And then the Genesis shmup library is more like the dad shmup kind of variety, I would
Dad
say.
shmup.
Yeah, you know, like, do you know of any games made by Toa Plan?
No, actually, never heard of them.
Okay, They made a lot of the foundational games that led the way to like every other shmup. So they made like Truxton
Oh
and
yeah.
what's it, Fire Shark and Zero Wing.
Yeah, classic Zero Wing. You can't forget about
Mm,
Zero Wing.
all our base
It
and
belong
whatnot.
to us.
But those games, those are very slow moving games. And if anything shoots you, you get sent back to a checkpoint.
Mm.
The appeal isn't as like electric or like youthful maybe. It's kind of like it's like a coming home from work and sitting on a couch kind of variety of shmup compared to the like the TurboGrafx. I want to sit down and grind this and learn these dense mechanics kind of shmup.
Yeah, because I guess it's Compile was the main developer on like PC Engine, TurboGrafx kind of stuff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And
Those
Compile was
games
about
are
blazing
very
fast
well
speed.
known. Hmm. Very craft developer. All their games have very intricate weapon systems, either providing you a lot of them or sometimes ways to mix and match them. I believe Spriggan is the game where you save 3 slots of weapons and the shot you get is a combination of the three.
Oh, that's cool.
Almost like an expansion of what Gunstar Heroes does.
That is insane. Because yeah, Gunstar Heroes'
Mhm.
system was so cool. You could have like a homing electric weapon, and so if you have that
Yeah.
in a shmup, then it's probably like you're juggling 5 things at once.
Yeah, it's like the properties influence one another. It's not like you're making a brand new weapon the way Gunstar Heroes does it. It's more like the shop properties are overlapping, but it's
Mm.
still done very well and it's a very good game. There's a lot of very good games on TurboGrafx and it's definitely one of those consoles where if you see something that looks cool, it's probably at least worth giving a shot. At worst it'll be like a 5, you know?
There's this one YouTuber I really enjoy the videos of called RD Stranger, and he covered the entire Famicom library from front to back in this thing called Fama Daily. Probably one of the best series on YouTube. And he's currently working through the PC Engine library. And judging by what I'm looking at, like I think even it's like around 60 episodes in so far, and they make it a daily. And I think it might actually be like the most underrated console library in terms of like outside Japan, because like of course a lot of them are like Japan exclusive, but like if you like the niche of, let's say, shoot 'em ups or something, then you're probably gonna find the best games of all time on that thing, and no one's gonna even talk about them because like no one's heard of like half these things.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's got a huge selection there. I think part of the reason why it didn't have much overlap here is like my understanding, at least as an outsider, is TurboGrafx CD was really big over there. I
Hmm.
guess they call it the PC Engine CD.
Yeah.
And it had a lot of RPGs, which at the time were like able to use the CD tech to include like animated stills of characters and like voice acted dialogue. There's always a lot of overlap between JRPGs and the appeal of anime and that like episodic nature of growing stronger and meeting people along the way.
Mm.
But then having the new tools to like visualize that further, that really struck a chord with them. And then you have the growing scene of like text adventure games and visual novels and dating sims. And a lot of those either weren't localized over here or those genres weren't popular here in the first place. So I think maybe that's why the console gets overlooked.
That
There's
is
a little bit
true.
of a language barrier.
That is very true. Because where the SNES was already popular and had a really big jump in certain games, like Seiken Densetsu 3 being like literally ported over here. Um,
Mm-hmm.
in contrast, like the fan base for the PC Engine was already like sparse at best over here because the marketing and like the whole issue. There's a lot of issues with the like console, and especially the way they redesigned it. Actually is like I think there's like
Mm-hmm.
substantially worse in terms of like there are actually very few jumps where the console is like that much worse in terms of hardware, at least to my knowledge, because like the game. First of all, the console got like 3 times as big. They I
Yeah, it's just like a chip in a giant inside a giant black shell.
It makes no sense. I think they ruined the outputs options because I remember it had like a really big issue with the outputs. Um,
I think it's RF only, so it's like what you use to get an antenna signal. You
yeah,
have to like mod it to run composite.
and I'm not sure
I
if
could
that
be
was like
wrong.
that's what I remember. Cause I remember people having to convert it. They had to get like third party conversion kits or whatever. Um, I'm not sure if it was
Hmm.
the same issue with the PC Engine, but at the very least, they didn't like make it unnecessarily like bigger and also make you have like a converter. Like it just was on the console, you know. Um,
Hmm.
so like I think that on top of like the competition in the 90s where Sega was actually pretty well established in like the international markets versus Japan where there was like yeah, I guess they exist. Um it definitely makes them feel like a third wheel of a race that's like ancient at this point versus like in Japan where they're like, oh yeah, no, this is like beating the Famicom's ass right now. We're making some amazing games over there, you know?
Oh yeah, in fourth gen in Japan, it's like Super Famicom and PC Engine fighting a very close battle with very different genres that they appeal to, and then Genesis was the way way distant third over there. It didn't make much of a ripple at all, except for like a few really notable titles.
That's why I think it's so interesting the Genesis because like Sega you could say a lot of things about Sega, but you can't say their history is not interesting because there's so much stuff about Sega that was just like either wow, this is cool or wow, they were stupid because
Yeah.
they had
Hmm.
infighting between themselves because like Sega of America was like, why are the Japanese guys so popular? Because they made better games. They didn't make Green Dog. uh and they worked
Yeah.
together and they had like beef, you know?
Hmm. The Honeymooners.
It was a lot. But um but yeah, I did want to ask, in terms of like your game taste, what do you have any like other games that you like particularly liked that you wanted to mention that influenced like the like Somnabuster?
Somnabuster specifically?
Yeah, because I wanted to ask about Disaster Arms just like in a section after this for a couple for a little while.
Okay. I think I kind of covered the base plate of like video games that inspired it. I would say
Okay.
again the Sonic, the kind of like Rise Star was another one.
Yeah, cause I remember that from the way like you attach yourself to various parts, like you fling yourself off of things.
Hmm. Uh, Kirby. You
Mm.
kind of see it a little bit in some of the ways the enemies behave. The way that levels are oriented to be like small rooms that connect through doors.
That is true. And it
Hmm.
is a very vertical game like Kirby is sometimes.
Hmm. You do have a lot of ways to gain vertical distance. I would say there's a couple inspirations I would say in the art style that take from like non-game media.
So like the web
Like
comic style you said.
yeah, webcomic style. I would say I was definitely influenced by like a lot of things that I read on computer or like on phone growing up through high school and college. But then also a lot of like the books that I read as a kid.
Hmm.
Like I was really into Calvin and Hobbes and like the
Real
Charlie Brown Peanuts comic strips when I was really
spitting.
little.
You're spitting.
And then, Garfield. Whatever the library had that had a funny cartoon character on the front. So, imitating a lot of that, and especially the cutscenes, but even some of the incidental character animations and the
Hmm.
poses.
Yeah, they're
Trying
very
to
like
get those strong
cartoonish.
keyframes in.
Like the one I remember I played through like the first level like five times because I remember the first character you meet like the jester woman and her like posing was
Hmm.
really like out there like and wide.
Everybody loves that pose so much where she's just like doing the derpy face while swinging her
Yeah,
arms
hey,
around.
I'm over here. It's so memorable.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah,
so what
I
kind of
always
stuff
put
are
it
you
on the
reading?
Steam page. What?
What kind of stuff were you reading back then? Like in terms of like web comics, because I know for like a lot of the comic artists they share a lot of inspirations for like the stuff they read when they were a kid. But like for
Hmm.
web comics, it's a wide range. I've never seen any two people read the same web comics in my life.
Yeah. Names that I feel like I can remember. A lot of stuff that was kind of like parodying video game culture.
Hmm.
So like I read a lot of Awkward Zombie, uh, and then Brawl in the Family was running when I was a kid. I think they stopped right before the Switch came out,
Hmm.
or around the same time. It was kind of like a variety Nintendo like daily strip, but then like sometimes they would do overarching stories, very silly, sometimes a little more sentimental. And then there was one I read at some time in college called Cucumber Quest.
Oh yeah, I was thinking of that one when I played the game. I was like, this reminds me because I have a like one issue of it on a physical book, which is just volume
Yeah, our
2.
library had it.
Wow.
It's very interesting because I completely forgot it existed until somebody brought up that the game reminded them of it. And I was like, oh yeah.
I hope that was me.
Like art like that, kind of like the simplified characters but still doing very strong like action key poses and very vivid colors and shading. That's kind of what I try to channel in my work. I
Side
love that
note,
kind of stuff.
have you ever tried the developer, I guess, or the artist for that? She made a new visual novel, and have you heard of it? Have you tried it?
I don't believe I have. What's it called?
I forgot. Let me see the name because the name of the developer is something I don't remember off the top of my head. So give me one moment.
Take your time. You're all good.
Cucumber Quest. So the writer for Cucumber Quest is, oh yeah, DGDG, right? That's her
Oh my
like
goodness.
that's her. Yeah, see that it reminds me of yours. I'm like it's letters
A little bit. It's just letters.
and I'm bad at letters. I can't spell. So yeah, it's called Soul of Sovereignty. I can post the
Soul of Sovereignty?
yeah, you post her website on the thing.
All right.
But I saw her because I see her Blue Sky because I followed her because I like Cucumber Quest's art style. Um, and I don't know. Oh yeah, I remember. I just realized I remember Lady of the Shard. I read that
Lady of the
way.
Shark?
Yeah, Lady of the Shard is this like little like webcomic short. It's an infinite canvas comic. Okay, that's kind of like how they do on Webtoon. But I remember I read this like way back, and I think
Mm.
it's one of the first like times I saw like Yuri lesbians and I like and that made a big impression on me because everything the way I think about everything in my life now is probably filtered through Yuri. So thank
Oh my
you
goodness.
Gigi. Good job. You ruined another life.
It's like Velma always says. I was mostly thinking about girls.
So true. Good job, Velma. But yeah, I wanted to mention that because first of all, every mention of a indie artist in any kind of way gives an angel their wings because you never know what person's listening and like, you know what, actually kind of want to I'm interested in that, and then they go and
Hmm.
discover them and it changes their life. You never know, so you want to mention them as much as possible. Like in this case, I hope someone goes and plays Somnabuster because I like the game.
Yeah.
And I just want to mention that because I like Cucumber Quest too. I think it's pretty cool.
Hmm.
But yeah, actually, did you draw all the art yourself for the game?
Yes. All the art is done by me. My process is I do a sketch and I render it in Clip Studio Paint.
Like you
And
do a
I'm very
physical sketch.
lucky that the budget version of Clip Studio gives me just enough frames of animation to do the stuff that I need to do. 'Cause I
That
think they cap you at like 24, so you couldn't use it to like make a cartoon out of it, but you can definitely make game animations with it.
24 like the frame rate or like 24 like
24
frames.
frames period per
That's
file.
pretty
If you
fucking
want.
funny.
Yeah.
So that's why it's like that. I thought it was like just to emulate the hardware constraints of the Genesis.
It's a little bit of both. It's all interdisciplinary.
That's true.
It's partly me being lazy, it's partly me imitating the style, it's partly me working with the tools that I have, which I continue to work with because I'm also lazy,
Wow.
you
See,
know?
that's why I like artists. Robots can't emulate laziness. They work too hard.
That's a perfect way to put it. It's the apathy that people have for certain elements in their work that tells you their true nature.
You can tell like Akira Toriyama really likes drawing cars, and everything the storyline was just, yeah, I guess I'll draw a story too. I guess I'll make a story or whatever.
Hmm.
Oh man. But yeah, actually I did write this down. Do films inspire games? Because movies. We're a big movie buff here at the MapleMilk channel.
I'm basically not a film buff at all. Like,
Wow.
again, I feel like I grew up watching Disney stuff. I grew up, I saw maybe like a lot of like buddy comedies because they're kind of like nice background noise while I work.
Mm.
And then otherwise, it's like Like if you ask me to name my favorite movie, it's probably like A Boy Named Charlie Brown or like Castle of Cagliostro. Like really basic animation films. It's always something I wish I got more into, and
Hmm.
I'm sure with time I will. But
Well, I
just
would
right
say
now,
I'd say the Charlie, like I'd say those are very intimate picks. It's not like you're watching. Oh yeah, the biggest Disney, the live action Lion King remake. That's my favorite movie. Like no, those are very personal picks. Despite the fact that they're I mean the Charlie Brown one is not very common. I wouldn't see many people say that's their favorite of all time. But I love that movie. I
hmm
do love that movie.
it was really important to me. I remember being a very like young kid watching it on DVD with my one grandma, and they get to the scene where Charlie Brown misspells beagle, and that really stuck with me.
Was it the one the
I
spelling bee?
it's the one where he goes to the spelling bee, he screws up. He goes home, he
Uh
sat by and Lance is like, you know something, Charlie Brown? You may have messed up, but the world didn't come to an end. Life goes on.
Man, that show that comic had some like vibe about it, man. It was just like that comic is basically like the equivalent of like a grown man in a kid's body. Like he has such like a very weary kind of just like tired way of looking at things.
A little bit, yeah. I
Like
think what makes Peanuts so admirable is that he does kind of present childhood in a very authentic way. And, from having worked with kids for another gig I have where I do teaching,
hmm.
there are kids who do talk like that. They do kind of like take on this persona of being like a soothsayer with all this sage wisdom, and they're like making verbose quotes to things. And it's like, kids just say whatever, they have no filter. I think Peanuts is very authentic to that. It's very lived in.
The funniest part is that sometimes the kids don't keep that sage wisdom. They just turn into a normal adult. It's like, what happened to
Yeah.
you?
I used to really like cars. And now I just really like taxes.
What happened? It's like that episode of SpongeBob where he's like, where did the years go? Oh my god. What's it called? But I did want to ask, now I could finally move into Disaster Arms. The new game you're
hmm
creating. I wish I could ask about. I guess ask about Cycle Chaser first because I assume you have less to say about that one because it was a smaller project, right?
I'd have a less to say since it is a smaller project. I'd say I have more to say about like the design ethos, but I feel like that doesn't really fit into this kind of podcast.
That's
It's a
more of like
lot of
a
very specific things that only really make sense if you have a background in shmups.
yeah. It's more of like a Even though I am interested, I guess that'd probably be like
Oh yeah, for sure.
that'd probably be something you probably should cover in your channel. I think that'd probably be a very
Yeah,
interesting video.
it's its own can of worms and its own level of tirades and whatnot.
But
But
I would want to hear about that because I'm just looking at the screenshots right now. I'm like, man, we need more cool shmups. Even though we have a lot of people making them, it's just like it's still an underrated genre. Still is a genre that I think it's very hard to conceptualize as a genre they can get into.
yeah, that was kind of what I tried to do with that game. At least I wanted to make a game that bridged the gap and still had the cool elements of shmups and still had something that shmup players like can be responsive to, but was definitely playable for non-shmup people.
Hmm.
It was actually something I made as a college project. It was my senior thesis.
Really
And then the people who played the demo were like, yeah, I actually kind of got the hang of this. This is pretty interesting.
nice.
And you always look back and you're like, I wish I could change these things about it, but I am still very happy with how the game design of Cycle Chaser came out. I would say it's my happiest achievement as far as like game theory goes.
Hmm. It's a well presented game in terms of just like it's like whenever someone could write a very well structured song equivalent, right?
Right. Though
Mm.
you say that, I look back at those graphics and I'm like, man, these are ugly. None of these lines are congruent with each other. What am I doing? What's up with these
They're very
colors?
geometric. I'd say that they're very like what's it called? But I mean, even analyzing your old games, you could like. I feel like there's always a sense where like if you're far enough away from it, then you could view it like, oh, that was so quaint.
hmm
So
There will definitely become a time where I could look past all my own shortcomings towards it. I
yeah.
still look at that game in fondness anyway.
That's true. But I did want to ask about Disaster On because I think it looks really fucking cool.
Thank you. Yeah, we can definitely talk about Disaster Arms.
Okay,
I'm
so
actually very close to finishing it.
really, so how far do you think you are in terms of like I guess percentage wise?
It's pretty easy to quantify, I'd say. So it's a 30 boss game.
Hmm.
Uh, there is basically every area is like short platforming section, then a boss fight, just like Alien Soldier. So I have 28 of them done. I
Ooh,
have two left to do. Then there's doing like all the post production stuff, and
okay.
that's done.
And is there a demo that you could play on Steam or something?
I have a demo on itch that I threw up there randomly one day and I never advertised it. But there is
Oh,
going to be a Steam demo coming, like a much more polished version in
ooh,
Steam Next Fest. I'm going to try launching
ah.
it around like late May, early June.
All right, you hear that, guys? You hear that? The one listener who listened to all the way through, listen, play Disaster Arms on. Well, it's May, June, somewhere around there.
Somewhere around there.
Play the.
Definitely look for it in Steam Next Fest.
Okay, because I know there's a lot of games that are exciting in Steam Next Fest. You see about them, and then you start seeing more and more as time goes on.
Mm-hmm.
But so what inspired that game? Because I could see a lot of Alien Soldier in that one, and all the running guns, and I had that meme that you made earlier where it's like a Trojan horse of Disaster Arms bringing in Alien Soldier and a Contra Hardcore, and then inside are actually Mega Man 7 and Thunder Force. Was that 2, 4?
Yeah, that was four. That was kind of like an after the fact moment because going into it, I really did just want to make like an Alien Force style game, but I was kind of bringing in some of the design elements of Cycle Chaser and Somnabuster.
Hmm.
Some of the shmup sensibilities, some certain things with the way the platforming works in Somnabuster, and so the end result is a game that's much more like a Mega Man game, at least as far as like how the bosses behave and how what kind of abilities you have. So you don't have any of like the full screen dashes of Alien Soldier to look for. You don't have your burning Phoenix move where you burn some HP to like kill something in one hit.
Hmm.
But I hope I can still deliver. I'm trying to make a game that's just back to back cool moments of animation and some interesting things going on with its story, what it says and what it doesn't say.
Hmm. Honestly, I believe you because I'm looking at the Steam screenshots and I see, as the kids say, hype aura moments. uh, like, look at this, like the one on the left, like how, like that looks fucking beautiful. That's I guess to describe it because I just realized it's gonna be a single screen. Like, the main character is like a red haired like robot lady with like cool giant arms and weapons and shit, like Ghost in the Shell type beat.
Kinda. Yeah, I guess kind of comparable to like an Evangelion. Angsty teenage boy, age of technology, kind of existential.
Hmm.
Some of it plays to like feelings I had at that age. Some of it is me trying to like reflect to that in hindsight. We'll see how much of it actually works in the final version. Because I'm still going back and always rewriting things here and there that I am and aren't happy with.
Oh, I'm sorry. I a mistake there. I guess yeah, they're kind of androgynous, so forgive me. Their eyelashes are very beautiful,
No, that's okay. That's okay.
very beautiful
It's
eyelashes.
my own art style. I always kind of like lean towards more of the androgynous side of character design.
Hmm. But what's it called? In terms of like the art style, like what I guess like what are you trying to convey in terms of this game in comparison to Somnabuster? Because Somnabuster was like a Alice in Wonderland fantasy kind of Disney vibe. So what would be like the influences for this one?
Uh, kind of like a little bit of like that childhood idea of what cool is. Sharp edges, kind of like monsters that are monstrous, but still kind of have like toyetic personalities and designs. Just a little bit goofy. Um, you can kind of see like a coldness in the aesthetic, which is something I didn't even notice until somebody else pointed it out to me.
Hmm.
I was at a I've been doing this like artists group thing with some people locally, and I was showing my work to them, and they actually didn't like it at all. And their feedback was that they thought it was too cold. But
Wow.
they also come from a different walk of life where they're very much environmentalists. So it's like they're all about like things that feel like they have that handmade touch, which I guess is its own can of worms. I don't know. I think I'm getting too far off the edge.
I think, it's kind of funny because if someone is from that kind of background and you try to make a science fiction kind of thing, wouldn't like them not liking it be a good thing?
No, that's fair. It's like what this appears to at first glance to somebody who has no background for games, who like was kind of like negative going into the age of technology. You know, this person, they would have been like in their 60s or 70s. I don't have the exact number, but like they got to see like technology and the internet come into its own. And with that, they kind of have their own stipulations about well, like the Musk era of technology obsession, the Silicon Valley kind of tech obsession.
Right, right. Like it's a different
Yeah.
kind of tech obsession.
Mm-hmm. Like, it is always very easy at a glance for people to look at my work and think like I'm in that Musk kind of tech bro area when it's like I try to do the opposite. I feel like whatever villain I'm putting in my game is kind of like a surrogate of like the faceless corporate mascot.
Right.
But that's its own tangent.
Yeah, that's like I guess that's like I guess we'll learn more about that in the in terms of the game because we'll get more context, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, like yeah, it's like it's like a cyberpunk kind of narrative, right?
A little bit. Kind of like maybe a little bit close to Mega Man Zero in terms of
Ooh,
both setting and what
yeah.
it's trying to communicate.
That is great because I like Mega Man Zero a lot. I think it's honestly when you say that I just realized that yeah that's like when you said the coolest thing I was like my brain went to Mega Man Zero because I played as a kid. I was like this is the coolest thing I've ever played in my entire life.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And
It's like
oh,
it's powerful, but it's still sleek. It's cutting edge.
it's like grungy, but like in a way that like even like a 10-year-old could understand.
Mm-hmm.
I think like if you're aiming for that vibe, I think it achieves it pretty well. But you know, I just have to play the demo of it because I'm very excited.
Thank you.
But I guess now I could I guess like we could talk about like a little bit more of the design elements of Somnabuster because I did play the game and since I did take notes on it a little bit, but I didn't finish all the way through. And I
Mm-hmm.
never cause like the game is, when you talk about substance, that game is pretty long actually. The game's a pretty long game.
It's a lot.
Um
I realized.
yeah, it's a chunky little thing. And when it comes to like the moment to moment gameplay, I did think of like I was gonna write a review, but I never could get the words out, and it's like whenever I force myself to write a review, it never works out. Narrative, I could kind of just kind of fumble through it, but review has to be a lot more like cohesive in terms of what it covers in terms of structure, and I never could really get an idea of how to do that right.
Right.
So I guess talking about it would be a better thing here. So in terms of like the my probably the thing I enjoyed the most about Somnabuster probably was the way it kind of like I don't know the world. I think that's probably the like I really found myself surprised about how much I enjoyed it because I thought like oh the art style is cool but I probably enjoy it as like a Genesis platformer or something like that. But honestly I was kind of like I guess enraptured by just like how the world kind of conveyed itself because you have these like NPCs that you pass by in a stage, right? And Kirby doesn't have any NPCs like that, but
Mm-hmm.
you don't talk to an NPC and they say some like something random, right? Something wild, and it feels like very like stilted and dreamlike. And then you go to the end of the stage, and then you fight a boss that's like, like the main character and the boss have like this kind of back and forth conversation that's really funny but
Mm-hmm.
they do it in a way that's like kind of goes with the theme of the game where it's like main character's like I want to go home, why don't you let me go home, and then the main boss is like but you look so delicious, you look so is that peppermint, delicious. And then you would have just stepped through a peppermint patch field or some shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it just feels like it's all like connected like in terms of gameplay and like it feels like an adventure, I guess. It feels like an Alice in Wonderland thing where you're just kind of like going through different scenarios, but like they connect in a way that's like dreamlike. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And that's probably the thing I enjoyed the most about the game in terms of like the what I liked. I thought the gameplay was solid. I had no complaints. Some of the levels, I think the game has a focus on like level design, right? And there are various ways you can like quantify a game's design elements, right? So like Kirby is a very like, what's it called? Level design focused game because the basis of Kirby is that you can avoid level design, at least for like the original version, like the original game, like Dreamland, you could fly over it.
Yeah.
So it's like two axes where it's like you can crawl on the ground and just and interact with the stage as if you're like kind of Mario-ish, or you can fly up and like avoid it if you're really bad at playing video games. And in this game, it's like if you had more axes of movement, but you still were on the ground in Kirby. You know what I mean?
I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah, because like the one thing I will say that kind of confused me is the stepping on the ceiling thing. I could never quite get the hang of it because like I jump and I go down, jump on top of it. I remember like eventually I did get like the hang of it, but I never felt like I could like grapple on. You know what I mean? I never felt like, I don't know. You know how like
there is a chance you played an earlier version where the ceiling was glitched.
Really?
I did find out from someone who play tested it within like a week of release that like on certain frame rates, the ceiling touch does not work, and you touch the ceiling for like one frame and you fall off of it, and if you do stick, it doesn't know to reset your ground acceleration, and so you kind of like have ice physics because it's using the air physics.
That's actually pretty funny because I'd say like it's about half and half, where half of my playthrough was on I think it was on Steam Deck initially, and then I played the early version, and then half of it's probably like after it got released and kind of patched a little bit up. So I think it's kind of funny to imagine like, wow, actually I was in there so deep I was playing a beta version. Oh man. But I mean, yeah, I'd say like probably like it's like probably my I guess I wouldn't say criticism. I probably say that like my main issues with the game probably like the ceiling. I don't know. I never could my brain didn't handle it right. I don't know why. I just didn't feel integrated with like level design the same way I wanted it to be.
It can be a little disorienting. Yeah.
Yeah.
My bad.
No, it's cool. No, I'm just making sure I get all the stuff I need to out. What's it called? One thing I did like was the bosses. I did tell you, I think I literally DM'd you this, where it's like one of the bosses, I think it was the World 2 boss or something, like it was like the dragon boss was like really challenging in a way I thought was really fun. And they had like, I had to learn like the burst move and shit. I remember there was one move I think that's like the one move I didn't use, and then when I remembered, I'm like, oh wow, I'm an idiot. Like it's like I used the burst move and it just like made the boss battle a lot more fun, a lot easier. And that was it made it very challenging, but in like a way that I thought was like fun, because a lot of bosses you can have that way of challenging is kind of like difficult to design because it I guess it requires a lot of testing, but it's like
it does.
That like in terms of testing, is that probably like the longest or like worst part of like level, like in terms of like game design, like the testing and over and bug testing and shit like that?
It does take up most of the time of development. Like I would say if I spend about an hour writing code, it's like for every 5 minutes I spend writing something, I will then spend like 15 minutes making sure it's working in the exact way I want it to, both in terms of functionality and in terms of feel. But, I never look at game testing as like begrudging, because it's an excuse to play the game. And if you have fun making it and you have fun playing the game, it can't be something you take with a grain of salt.
I mean, if you made the game and you're saying, this sucks, I hate playing this game, I guess you shouldn't be making that game in the first place. But I do want to, because I think like the game, I noticed this when I was playing Half-Life 2 for the first time all the way through. Like I never finished Half-Life 2 until recently. I played through it like on the Xbox version, actually was the first way I played it. Horrible version. Frame rate was dog ass, but man, but man, did it punch weight. Man, did that thing try its best to run. I was like, I just admire it for that. But I was replaying Half-Life 2 and I realized like this game feels like it's well tested. It just feels like it's just like so like, you know, the amount of testing that went to it, and I know that game was rushed, but like it feels like no matter what you do, like you can't break the game apart, even though it's probably like there's probably ways to do it. But it's like I don't know, something about that
Oh
game
yeah.
feels very polished. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, and I kind of got that idea with like I was like I felt like the way I played your game, I was like, the way I played like some Nintendo games, where it's like it feels really polished. It feels like a very deliberate design, especially like since like Kirby level design, it feels like you played through the levels, you had to like scrape through. And I remember I saw a pre-release version. I went back to the beta versions, and I was like, yeah, the level design is completely different. You must have really like went back and like went through it, yeah.
It's not too different as far as like the actual arrangement of the stages. There are a few where I took a room and I just chucked it out because I hated it.
Wow.
Like stage 4-1. Do you remember the ducks that you collect and you feed them to the alligator door to get
Yes.
past it? There used to be some more sections like that, and I found they were just complete pace breakers, and they were really arranged weirdly, and they made you do a lot of little backtracking in these subsections that like doesn't feel conducive to what you want to be feeling when you're platforming. So I just chucked them out and gone. But
I
like most of the
appreciate that.
actual level arrangement stayed the same. The tile maps is what changed a lot, and like the background
Ah.
assets. I went over that with like a fine tooth comb so many times. Because like the kind of going back to like Genesis game design, something that's kind of on the designer side is that when you don't have a lot of like visual effects, when you don't have a lot of like particles, you don't have to worry too much about delineating the background from the foreground because everything is kind of a very solid, rigid object.
Mm.
And that's kind of a luxury you don't have when you make these kind of like modern games. Because if everything is just presented as is without like visual flourish or flare or sub animation, it looks a lot more static because you're seeing the image as is instead of it being filtered through pixels or it being filtered through a CRT screen.
Oh right, doesn't like yeah, it's because yeah, the way CRTs do it, like process like images differently, like dithering and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. It's a little hard for me to explain, and I may not even like, I may just not be qualified to explain it.
Hmm.
But in order to get the backgrounds like still looking the way I wanted them to, without just like blurring the way they looked, or without applying a texture that made it like different than the foreground, I had to do so much color theory,
Mm.
just so much constantly testing the luminosity and the saturation of the colors, so that they couldn't be mistaken for the foreground, but they still looked like they were part of the foreground. That was the most important part. Having visibility without sacrificing the feeling of immersion, like trying not to gamify it too much.
Right. Honestly, I every time I like, see a game developer talk about their game, they're always like, yeah, the hardest part of this game definitely was insert thankless like niche job here, like the audio engineering or like the yeah, the bug testing stuff like that, or like yeah, background
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, it is always some like minor thing that matters only to the person working on it.
But it's like that's honestly that's probably the thing I admire most about people who can like finish and ship a game, because they can go and say, you know what, either they finished it to the point where they're satisfied, or they're like, you know what, I've worked on this so much, I think it's good enough where I'm like, fuck it, let's just ship it.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know like if you're
Yep.
working on a game like that, if you actually care about the game, you're not gonna just like stop halfway through.
Mm-hmm. Lord knows there are those developers who just do stop halfway through, and they
Ugh.
either ship half a game or they do a complete slap job for the second half.
Oh my god, it happens so often where it's like especially with RPGs, like the same thing happened with like I heard of the infamous example of like Dragon Quest 2, where Dragon Quest 2, the original version in Famicom, had horrific balancing on the second half of the game. Like an extremely bad. Like if someone's played Mother 1, like it's like
Yeah,
Mounty Toy, but worse. And I did not even know that's possible, but someone explained to me like the sheer amount of like levels you need to grind out for. I'm like, Jesus Christ.
I have heard that about too as well. My understanding is that the final boss of that game is completely RNG dependent.
Oh yeah, and it's like they have to rush out a game that was double the size of Dragon Quest One in like
Mm-hmm.
9 months, and mind you, they made a new genre. They literally made like the console RPG basically by themselves, and like, all right, let's make
Yeah.
this bigger and better and better, and add two party members, and let's just do all this shit. And it's like, you know, the second half really suffered for it, but like it was necessary to have the birth of, Japanese RPG.
Yeah.
But it's just
You
like,
don't make an omelet without cracking a few eggs.
man, is not the truth. But I think the mistakes, even if that game has issues, it's it's the mistakes that you can, especially because they could polish it out later. Dragon Quest 2 has been re-released like at least 5 times. So,
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's important to like, in the cases where it's a thankless job, try your best. But even if you don't get it all perfectly right, it's not like you're gonna be like, it's not like it's like gonna kill you, The same thing Charlie Brown
Yeah.
said, or like the same thing Linus said. I think it was Linus in that movie.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's Linus.
World didn't end. World won't end. Oh man. But I do think what's it called? You see, yeah. So timing, we're almost at 2 hours, and people usually don't notice because the conversations are just
Whoa.
that good. Yeah. So we could wrap it up. I have maybe like two more questions, I guess.
I can definitely do 2 more questions.
Okay. So in terms of like, what's it called? Like, what do you want to achieve with your games? I guess like in terms of like, what is the, like, whenever I make an album, right? I always say like, man, I really like In Utero by Nirvana, right? That's probably like one of my favorite albums of all time. Probably like, and it's like, whenever I make a song, I think of like the way, Kurt Cobain structured the songs on like, his albums and like the way that like they work, right? So like in terms of like what you would like want to achieve, and like let's say like, if someone compared you to X artist, you'd be like very proud of it. Like what would be like the, I guess the top tier of what you could achieve? What do you like? What is your goal? I guess it's kind of hard to describe.
It's always the dream to just like make something so good that it comes up in ubiquitous conversation.
Like Gunstar Hero does for nerds like us.
Yeah, like people are asking what's some real good running guns out there. I hope Disaster Arms is the kind of game that people can say that about that.
Mm-hmm.
But I'd say even more than that. There's just specific design and emotional qualities that I took away from the games I liked as a kid and even now as an adult that I want to see alive in the modern indie scene.
Mm-hmm.
We do really have a wonderful indie scene where a lot of people are bringing back these old IPs and making something new, or they're making their own thing inspired by it. But there's always something... I always find myself getting a little caught in my own soup and being like, yeah, that's a Mega Man game, but it's also a Metroidvania. Or like, yeah, that's a Mega Man game, but it doesn't have this specific thing about the level design I like.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of being a designer is being a little bit of a stinker, being a little bit selfish and going, it's not enough that this type of game is back and flourishing. It has to be done in this extremely specific way. Not even perfect. A specific way that resonates only to me. Something that is impossible to quantify in words. And it is a very kind of a narcissistic way to look at game design, but you kind of have to be a good game designer.
I think that's just like creativity in general, because if you're like, album comes out, you're like, man, this like is a very great album, has a really good guitar solos and really amazing like the album has every song is amazing, but the drums, they're just not there. Like I literally have like like I just like I was talking about, speaking of Nirvana, like I'm like Nirvana Nevermind is a critically acclaimed album. People say it's a masterpiece, greatest album of all time. Like this album's amazing, but the drums, they're just not hard enough. I'm like, I complain about literally the greatest album I've ever made because I'm like, the drums, they're just not the same. So it's like, I think that's just like what people are, people,
Hmm.
people are little stinkers. They'll be like, they'll find like the thing that's like basically what they want, but they're like, nah, it needs to be this. And then it's like, I gotta go make it. That's really what the main difference is,
That
it,
is exactly what it is. You don't become a good game developer or an artist as a whole without being like the most cynical, evil, nitpicking loser in your head that you possibly can. That it's through design that you indulge all of those little annoyances, all those itches on your back, so to speak.
we need those game designers who will make 3-hour nerdy video essays on like a specific room in Kirby speedrunning or some shit like that.
Mm-hmm. Why this level is so important to the design ethos of Super Mario Sunshine.
Yeah.
7 hours, 32 minutes.
What's it called? There's that one video essay by I think it was Shugles. That was like a 7-hour breakdown of Pokemon Omega Ruby. I was like, Jesus Christ.
That sounds about right.
And
I saw someone do something of similar length for Sonic CD.
man, you see, you gotta be a turbo nerd to make a good game, or make it even. You gotta be a turbo nerd to make any good art. Honestly, you can't just be like cool all the time. You gotta like. There's always that moment where like, even like the coolest people are just like you see them locking in and just working their hardest, and they're just kind of just like really like focused, and they're like, oh shit, they actually know what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Have you played Cave Story by the way?
I have played Case Story.
What's it
There
called?
was a point in time where I would say that was in my top 10 games.
Damn.
It's really wonderful, very foundational to what I like about game storytelling and game feel.
What happened? What happened?
Nothing really happened. There was something that changed my mind about it. It's just I got older and I played more games, and your favorites kind of become a summation of different qualities that you like in games rather than like all my favorite games have the shonen boy protagonist with a gun shooting guys like an arcade game. You know?
Yeah. Which the Shonen Boy
You gotta
protagonist.
have a rhythm game there that's really important to you. You gotta have some esoteric JRPG in there, some kind of puzzle game in there.
That's true. What are yours? What are your like for each of those? Like I love Final Fantasy VII, but I guess it's a common pick. Mother 3,
Yeah.
common pick.
I really like Neo The World Ends With You.
Ooh,
That one's real good.
I've
And
heard
it
so
got
many
really
people.
overshadowed, I feel.
I think it came out like at a ridiculously bad time. I remember people said like it got no marketing. It came out at a really bad time. I don't
I
remember
think it
what.
came out the first year of COVID.
Oh, yeah, that'd do it. Yeah, that'd do
Hmm.
it. Have you ever played the first World Ends With You?
I have. And that game's good. It it's a little different though. It's like that kind of like the coming of age like guy learning to accept his emotions and human experiences kind of story.
Hmm.
And then like Neo The World Ends With You kind of uses that emotional thrust to be like, let's talk about communities and how they coexist through technology and how perception and fear of meeting certain perceptions influences how we treat each other.
You know,
And it does a lot more with the party. Like the first game is all about the protagonist, Neku,
mhm.
and then like the second game is like uh, Rindo is kind of apathetic to everyone, and he's kind of like a vessel through which all these other characters get to explore things.
Honestly, I wait. Actually, are Neo and the original isolated enough to play by themselves? 'Cause I kind of do want to try out the sequel.
I think you could just jump into the sequel. There are characters that overlap, but I don't think they never really expect you to remember the moments with them.
Okay.
Like, yeah.
Honestly, I'm just thinking about it. I'm just like, uh, I've heard so much about that series because like the DS is it's kind of funny. The RPG landscape was basically moved to the portable consoles until it kind of converged to the Switch. The Switch is kind of like the hybrid console, so it's kind of neither and both now. But I
Yeah,
remember when
we're
those.
very lucky JRPGs have been able to resurface now that we have a platform where you can make them at a low budget, and that's still seen as like an industry acceptable thing to do.
Yeah,
Because seventh gen is like nobody can afford to make a game as expensive as Final Fantasy 13, and that game still came out of the woodwork with its own issues.
yeah, it was pretty rough. People did not like, especially the engines and development tools they had then. They did just not adjust well. The only like really great consoles for like the only great RPGs for like those consoles were like either pretty niche or like they kind of like didn't do so well in terms of like I guess like critical acclaim, I guess, or like sales, like the Mistwalker ones where you have like Blue Dragon and the other one, Lost Odyssey. People
Mm-hmm.
feel very strongly about them now, and I'm sure they did then, but like back then, like no one cared because it's an Xbox game RPG, Japanese RPG, you know?
It is kind of like that converging point where a lot of critics were starting to become really anal towards JRPGs, mostly unfairly so.
It was kind of weird. I don't know why they did that, but you know, at least we're past that point. I think. Well, actually, what do you think of the modern indie game scene, as it were? You know, like, are we in a golden age of the indie game, or is it kind of like, do we still have like a little ways to go for that to be like that kind of like, you know, chrysalis breaking moment? I guess.
It's impossible to say so.
Mm,
I don't think there's ever a way you can quantify that because indie is kind of categorized by people and individuals doing their own thing outside of like the wider public consciousness. So the I don't know.
I guess a
The
better
more you
question.
try
Oh, sorry.
to what's up?
I would say like a different phrase the question differently, but I guess you could finish what you were thinking.
I'm kind of rambling. Phrase it differently, maybe it'll help me find what I'm trying to say.
So, like in terms of like the indie sphere, what era or years do you think that you had the most games that you would say like are your favorites? You know, like some people say like the earlier scene was like up to Super Meat Boy from like Cave Story or back, I guess like if you count like, the early PC scene where it's like one person could make a game by themselves. Or if you like the 2012s where it's like, or 20 early 2010s where up to like Shovel Knight or like you had like fucking uh the what's the fucking game like Spelunky stuff like that. Now we have
Yeah, I
like
see what you mean.
yeah.
I don't think I have a favorite era of indie games. It's a little different than consoles. With game consoles, you have companies, you have shared knowledge and infrastructure, and so like there's always a little bit of overlap with Genesis games because they're all being published by the same team and they have a lot of similar hands working on them. You don't have that with indies. What define those games is what those people already know from their walks of life casually and what they seek out to learn through online resources.
Mhm.
So it's kind of impossible for me to look at indies in a vacuum, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Because it's like the same thing as saying AAA games. Well, that's like a big, wide range of video games and ideas and like what
Hmm.
they're achieving anyway.
Though even in the AAA space, like there's certain trends because trends are enforced by our tools
Mm.
and what we can and can't do easily. Like right now, open world is the trend, not just because it's popular, but because we have optimized our engines to be really good at batching out like chunks of area with lots of tasks littered around them,
Mhm.
but not so much as like scripted set pieces. And that's why we have our Assassin's Creeds and our Breath of the Wilds.
Right. I get what you mean. So
Mm-hmm.
in the case of I guess like because it's kind of a hard question, right? What do you think? Like,
It is.
so I guess I'll ask, what game do you think inspired you to make games? Because there's a difference between your favorite game and the game that inspired you the most, right? Because like I know everyone has like that one moment where they're like, you know what, I really want to make X piece of medium, and usually it's from like one like point where they're like, oh man, I listened to this album and it just had this like song that I really liked or something like that, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a moment
I
like that?
have to admit, I don't think I have a game that made me go, I want to make games, but I have like a general piece of media that made me go, I want to create.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, that was being really young and reading Captain Underpants.
Really?
Yeah, because the thing with the Captain Underpants stories was that you would have each chapter with like the text plus some illustrations done by the writer to go along with it. But then interspersed throughout were the two main characters making their own like fake comic book in universe describing their perspective of the events.
Like the Fliporama.
Yeah, not even just the Fliporama, but like George and Harold going back through the events of the previous book, and maybe they show themselves in a more glorified light because you know they're kids, they think they're awesome. But like seeing how those illustrations still conveyed so much emotion and power, and the fact that they were also done at such a low level of detail made me go like, I want to replicate this. And so I would make my own art. I would make my own little homemade comic books. Then I start making my own web comics. And then I was lucky enough to get that game dev job with my school. And it's like I never had the idea even at that point that I would be able to make games. But because I was so happy to be creating, because I wanted to make things that like felt handmade, I was able to channel that through game dev.
You know, honestly, I think that's a great answer. I think I like that. You know,
But thank you.
I find it. I just thought about it. I'm like, you know what? Honestly, in the cutscenes of Somnabuster, I do notice that kind of you know thing with like the way a comedy is shown in terms of like you know the posing and stuff. It's very like you know like I said, it's like very you know cartoonish.
It is. It's kind of more newspaper comic-y than like anything else I could describe to it. I think I see that and I think of like baby blues. No, my mom is the only one who's read baby
I have
blues.
not. As I'm trying to think of like I've read my fair share of newspaper comics and most of them are not good. But I did not read that one.
What? You don't like the Lockhorns? You don't like the
Oh,
balding guy talking about how much he hates his
you don't
wife?
like Dilbert? Come on, everyone likes Dilbert. Yeah, sadly, the newspaper is not the peak of cinema anymore. I'm sorry to say,
What? Who would have known?
but yeah, I think I do wish I asked you more about your music, but honestly, you know, I think music kind of speaks for itself. You know, that those drums be kicking, that hit be hitting. You know,
Yeah. Thank
so
you.
we're 2 hours in. So well, I guess maybe I started recording a little before. I need to cut it out, I guess. But in terms of you know, we're about to end here. I think that's a good way to stop. I think that last you know, paragraph or so was very you know, showed a lot of where you're coming from in terms of, you know, of your creation. And I think I wanted to shine a light on that, you know, to get this
Mm-hmm.
contractually obligated video done in a way that
No, no, no. You're all good. You're all good. I'm the one who should be here thanking you for giving me the space to like share all my thoughts about games. You know, you're the one taking your time. You reached out to me. I really appreciate that. It's very kind of you.
well, I thank you for your humbleness, but also I will say, now we're at the end of the podcast, will make you look like such an asshole. In terms of context, I contacted you in I think it was like August to do like a review or something of Somnabuster, and I you do remember I did DM you progressively, just tell you the progress I had in there, and I had a lot of trouble trying to get it done, and like
Remember that.
it is literally May now. It is May. It is.
That's okay. Life happens,
It's
and it's
almost.
like
It's almost been a year.
it takes a lot to make anything, but even more so when you're doing it as a hobby instead of like a career. You know.
Yeah, but you know, since I did get Simon the Buster, and I do appreciate the you know the chance to you know play the game and even preview it, be part of technically be a part of the development team in a way in a weird way. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, I did want to at least give exposure to your games because I do think there's you know what I like in the indie space, seeing people like you know use their own experiences and make something extremely specific they want to see and let that put it into the world because I know people like me appreciate it because I'm like, man, I really wish I had Gunstar super duper heroes right now. Oh well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. I'm glad to be bringing my very specific and selfish vision into the world.
everyone's got to
It's
be a little
very fun
selfish.
and very fulfilling.
But yeah, I think. Do you have anything else you want to tell through the audience, the one or two people that probably sat down and listened to this whole thing?
Uh, well, if you sat down this long, I really do appreciate you taking the time and listening to us talk about all these different genres that have informed like the style of the games that I make. And I hope I can continue making games of this aesthetic and of these sensibilities. So, just best wishes towards the future, and thank you for the time for listening.
Sounds good to me. Um, Now last thing, do you have anything to advertise? Anything coming soon? You know, we already talked about Disaster Arms, so you have anything you want to share with us?
I Well, Disaster Arms is still a little bit of ways out. You can look forward to that demo coming next month, and then you can probably expect an announcement for the release date in the coming weeks after that.
Mm-hmm.
So just keep your eyes peeled. If you really, really like getting up in a boss's face and point blanking them with bullets and watching an HP bar just fall from 100 to 0 in no time flat, I think you'll like this game. I think if you want to walk up to a giant like fish guy with gills and you just want to punch him, you're gonna like this game.
Mm-hmm. And who do you think Somnabuster is for? Since that's currently out and people can currently give you money.
I think Somnabuster is for people who are like, I don't know. I feel a little bit on the spot there. If, well, if you like anything about like self-development, I would say Somnabuster is for you.
Okay. I think that's a good. I guess it's a good way to put it. I think that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. Last thing. What's a game you just recommend somebody off the spot, like a knee jerk? Like, what's a game you just recommend?
Game that I just recommend.
Yeah. Don't think about too
I
hard.
just played Custom Robo a little bit.
Custom Robo
on the N64.
Ooh, not even the GameCube version, the N64 version.
Yeah, the N64 version. I put it on a flash card, and that game you get to put on a gun that shoots 2 bullets vertically on top of each other. And it's really nice because whenever you fire it, the AI thinks that they can dodge it by jumping up, and they can't because it fired another bullet on top of it, and you just kill everybody that way. And you mill through a 5-hour campaign that way, and it's like, that is the very specific kind of game dev sauce I'm there to see. Just a really cheap, funny strat. If you like those kinds of like games, if you like those toyetic action games for like real young kids, that's a real good one. Give it a try. It does have an English patch.
Nice. And you said you played it on the flash card, right?
Yep, on the flash card.
Perfect. Well, yeah, aside from that, I think we're pretty much done here. I don't want to keep you all year. You have to go back and work at your game after all. So, but yeah, thank you for talking with me. And yeah, thank you for talking to the audience, because the audience is, they're very enthralled, they're very listening, very tight with you, dap them up, yeah. So dap them up. So, but yeah, I think that's about it here. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Patron of the Algorithm podcast, in which we somehow find a way to get really artsy fartsy every time. And I hope you check out David Peters' next game and all of his games before, and just enjoy playing video games in general, Sega Genesis games in general. So that's about it here. You're gonna say goodbye to the audience?
Goodbye to the audience.
Goodbye to the audience. Bye everybody. Goodbye everybody.
Bye-bye.